The summer of 1914 was full of hope, with cities alive in the golden sunlight and people enjoying the peace of a world that seemed stable. Across Europe, families strolled through parks, children played in the streets, and the future felt bright and secure. But in an instant, an assassin's bullet in Sarajevo shattered that illusion, sending shockwaves through the continent and changing everything. An archduke was dead, and Europe's old empires, bound by alliances and rivalries, called up their armies, setting the stage for a conflict no one truly understood. Young men marched off, dreaming of glory and adventure, cheered by crowds who believed the war would be over by Christmas. But the war they entered was unlike any before. This was a war of machines, mass slaughter on a scale never seen, with artillery shells raining down and bodies strewn across the mud. Generals clung to old tactics, sending waves of men into battle. But technology had changed the rules and made old strategies deadly mistakes. The machine gun defined the Western Front. A few men could mow down hundreds in seconds, turning open fields into killing grounds. The age of heroic charges ended. The age of hiding in trenches began. Soldiers learned to fear the whistle of shells and the rattle of gunfire more than any enemy they could see. Then came gas, clouds of poison drifting across no man's land, burning lungs and skin, blinding eyes and haunting survivors with memories of agony. Soldiers donned crude masks, but terror lingered with every shifting wind, never knowing if the next breath would be their last. To break the deadlock, the British unveiled a secret weapon, the tank, a monstrous machine that seemed to defy the very landscape of war. These metal beasts crawled over wire and trenches, terrifying enemies, even if they often broke down or got stuck in the mud. The tank was slow, noisy, and unreliable, but it changed the idea of battle. Armored assault had arrived, and the future of warfare was being forged. Above, the airplane became a weapon, soaring over the chaos below and opening a new dimension to the conflict. Pilots first spied on enemy lines, then dropped bombs and fired pistols, risking their lives in fragile machines of wood and canvas. Soon, machine guns were mounted, and the dogfight was born, men dueling in the clouds, turning the sky into a deadly arena. The sky itself became a battlefield, filled with the roar of engines and the crack of gunfire. War was now fought on land, in the air, and with weapons that shattered old notions of honor and courage, leaving only devastation behind. The Western Front became a landscape of mud, wire, and death, a place where hope was buried beneath the shattered earth. Every new weapon brought new horrors, and every solution led to new problems, as armies struggled to survive and adapt. The world's first industrial war had begun, with factories churning out weapons and trains carrying millions to the front. Nothing would ever be the same. The old world was dying in the trenches, its traditions and certainties swept away by the storm of war. The new world was being born in fire and steel, shaped by invention, destruction, and unimaginable loss. The war's true horror was only just beginning, as millions would soon learn the cost of this new kind of killing. The future of warfare had arrived, forever altering the fate of nations and the lives of those who survived. On the Western Front, war became a grim stalemate, a place where hope faded and fear was constant. From Belgium to Switzerland, armies dug in, creating a maze of trenches that stretched for hundreds of miles, shaping the landscape into a scarred labyrinth. Soldiers endured endless mud, swarms of rats, and the ever-present threat of shell fire, a daily struggle for survival that tested their bodies and minds. The order to go over the top meant leaving the safety of the trenches, charging into a hail of machine gun fire and almost certain death. It was a brutal, endless cycle. Attack, counterattack, and thousands lost for just a few yards of shattered ground, with little hope of real progress. But the East was different, a world apart from the mud and wire of the West. The front stretched from the Baltic to the Black Sea, vast, open, and mobile, with battles unfolding across sweeping plains and forests. Armies marched across huge distances, fighting massive battles that shifted the front lines by hundreds of miles, making the war here one of movement and uncertainty. Russia's army was enormous but poorly equipped. Many soldiers lacked rifles and supplies were scarce, leaving them vulnerable and exposed. The Germans, disciplined and well-armed, inflicted crushing defeats at Tannenberg and the Masurian Lakes, shattering Russian hopes for a quick victory. The Eastern Front was a war of movement, but just as deadly, bleeding Russia dry, devastating its countryside and pushing its people to the brink of collapse. The suffering was immense, with millions displaced and starving, as the old order crumbled and the world changed forever. This was a world war, drawing in empires and their colonies. The conflict stretched far beyond the trenches of Europe, pulling in people and resources from every corner of the globe. No continent was untouched by the fighting or its consequences. Men from India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Africa fought in distant lands for causes not always their own. They left their homes, families, and familiar landscapes to serve in foreign armies, often under foreign commanders, in battles that would shape the fate of nations. The Gallipoli Campaign in 1915 was a costly failure for the Allies, but it forged national identities for Australia and New Zealand. The bravery and sacrifice of the Anzac troops became a defining moment, remembered each year as a symbol of courage and resilience. In Africa, German officer Paul von Lettow-Vorbeck led a small force in a guerrilla campaign, tying down Allied troops and causing immense suffering for local people. The war in Africa devastated communities, disrupted lives, and left scars that would last for generations. The Middle East saw the British encourage the Arab Revolt against the Ottomans. Promises of independence were made to Arab leaders, fueling hopes for a new era after centuries of Ottoman rule. T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, helped organize raids that disrupted Turkish supply lines. His daring exploits became legendary, inspiring both his allies and future generations. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire redrew the map, but also sowed seeds of future conflict. New borders were drawn with little regard for the people living there, setting the stage for decades of unrest. Colonial soldiers saw the world and the world saw them. Their presence in Europe challenged old ideas about race, empire, and belonging. The old imperial order was shaken. The war exposed the vulnerabilities of empires and inspired new movements for independence. The war's reach was global, and its consequences would echo for generations. Families everywhere mourned, and entire societies were transformed by loss and upheaval. New nations and new problems emerged from the chaos. The peace that followed was uneasy, and the world faced challenges it had never seen before. The world was changing, and nothing would be the same. Old certainties vanished, replaced by a sense of both hope and uncertainty. The seeds of future struggles were sown in these distant campaigns. The legacy of World War I would shape the destinies of nations and peoples for decades to come. In 1916, the Western Front saw its bloodiest battles, Verdun and the Somme. The Germans attacked Verdun, aiming to bleed France white. For 10 months, both sides fought over a few devastated miles. Over 700,000 men were lost. Verdun became a symbol of senseless slaughter. Meanwhile, the British launched their own offensive at the Somme. A week-long bombardment failed to break German defenses. On July 1st, British troops advanced, and were cut down by machine guns. Nearly 60,000 British casualties on the first day alone. The battle dragged on for 5 months, with over 1 million casualties for a few miles gained. Tanks appeared for the first time but made little difference. Verdun and the Somme became bywords for futility and loss. The war's cost was measured in lives, not territory. The Western Front was a graveyard of hope. The scale of suffering was unimaginable. The world watched in horror as Europe bled. The Great War was total war. Entire nations mobilized for battle. Factories shifted to making weapons. Food and fuel were rationed. Women filled jobs left by men, working in factories, driving buses, and serving as nurses. Their efforts challenged old ideas and fueled the push for women's rights. Propaganda united people but also spread hatred and simplified the conflict. Hardship and grief touched every home. Food shortages and loss wore down morale. The initial enthusiasm faded, replaced by grim determination. The war changed society forever on the front lines and at home. By 1917, Russia was collapsing under the strain of war. Millions of casualties, food shortages, and a hated czar fueled unrest. In March, protests erupted, soldiers joined the people, and the czar abdicated. A provisional government took over, but kept Russia in the war, a fatal mistake. The Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, promised peace, land, and bread. In November, they seized power and quickly sought peace with Germany. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk ended Russia's war, but at a huge territorial cost. This freed German troops for a final offensive in the west. Russia's revolution toppled an empire and changed the world. The old order was gone, replaced by new ideologies and new conflicts. The war's chaos had unleashed revolution. The consequences would echo for decades. The Eastern Front was closed, but the world was forever changed. For years, the US stayed neutral, but German U-boats and the Zimmermann telegram changed everything. Unrestricted submarine warfare threatened American lives and trade. The Zimmermann telegram revealed German plans to ally with Mexico against the US. Outraged, America declared war in April 1917. Fresh American troops, doughboys, boosted the exhausted Allies. By summer 1918, thousands arrived daily, tipping the balance. America's entry ensured Allied victory and reshaped the world order. While armies clashed on land, the war at sea was just as crucial. Britain's blockade strangled Germany's economy, causing severe shortages. German U-boats tried to starve Britain in return, sinking thousands of ships. The convoy system helped the Allies turn the tide in the Atlantic. As the war ended, old empires collapsed: German, Austro-Hungarian, Russian, Ottoman. In the Middle East, the Ottoman collapse left a power vacuum. Britain and France drew new borders, creating countries like Iraq and Syria, often ignoring local realities. This set the stage for future conflict and instability. World War I killed millions and scarred the world. It introduced new horrors and redrew the map. The war to end all wars failed in its promise. It solved some problems, but created many more. The world of 1914 was gone, lost in the fire and mud of the Great War.